Heyo, welcome into the Undrafted and Unqualified Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Anthony and I'm here with Vinny. Yeah, I'll let Vinny talk about what we're doing today.
Yeah, so what's up, everybody? We're going to continue our ranking episodes today. In our most recent episode, we ranked our 24 through 13 top running backs in the PPR format. And today we're going to finish out those rankings and go 12 to 1. Yeah, similar or actually same format of we each have our own set of rankings, and we basically combine them based on the averages of each player at each spot that we had them at. Yeah, we're going to finish up our top 12 today for PPR running backs.
hmm And because this is going to segue right into the next couple of players we're going to talk about, just a reminder, similar to last episode, where if we're further apart on two guys, we ended up ranking them lower than the guys we're more neutral on. We figured, if we're more neutral, we'll rank them a little bit higher because both of us have similar beliefs about the guy. Whereas if we're opposites, we're going to drop them down if, and this is only if the average of where we have them in our rankings ends up being the same as another player. With that being said, let's just hop right into it. And the first player, RB12 for us, is Bucky Irving, who averaged out to 11, but Vinny has him down at 13 while I have him up at 9. The pros also have him. Well, the pros are pretty bullish. The pros have him at 8 actually. Um, Let me just double check, make sure that's PPR. It is. So yeah, the pros have Bucky up at 8. Yeah, I guess I'll start off just because I'm a little bit higher on Bucky.
Yep.
The thing for Bucky for me, I'm gonna pull up his stats as I start talking about it, but the thing for Bucky for me was I'm a little worried about some of the efficiency translating. He was so efficient last year. But I kind of like the potential for him in terms of snap share increasing. So just looking at some of his snap share, like when he started taking off, his best week through week 6 was in week 6 when he had a 64% snap share and he had 18 and a half fantasy points, 14 carries, 81 yards, a touchdown, two receptions, 24 yards. And then he dropped in snap percentage again, but continued to produce. And then we hit week 13, and that's where he started getting all the carries. Week 13, he had 25 carries, 152 yards, one touchdown, three receptions, 33 yards, and he ended up being the RB1 on the week. This was against Carolina. I get it, but still really encouraging on only a 54% snap share. He had then down the stretch, he continued to get more rushing attempts, and in week 18, he had a 72% snap share as well. So, I'm kind of just encouraged by the fact that he was as good as he was, and he finished at 13 overall last year. And this was in a pretty small sample size. He had only 207 attempts last year, 1,122 yards, eight touchdowns on 5.4 yards a carry. That's the thing I'm most concerned about. I think that's going to drop a little bit, similar to how Achan dropped off from his rookie year. But he can also catch the ball. He caught 47 of 52 targets for 392 yards, and he didn't even have a receiving touchdown. So, I'm kind of encouraged about the snap share most importantly. I think Rashad White, I like Rashad White. I know you've talked about him before as a sleeper and having standalone value. But I think the snap share can look a little bit more like a possibly a 60-40 split, or at least he'll be above 50% rather than below as he was most of the season. And he was still producing below 50% of snaps. So even if it doesn't increase by a lot, I still like the opportunity for him to produce. And this is a good offense, good offensive line. He has the capabilities of being a three down back. So again, if anything were to happen to White, that upside is baked in to drafting him. So I like him a lot. I'm a little worried about people reaching pretty high on him in terms of ADP. I think I'd much rather wait around and grab somebody else, maybe even a guy we mentioned yesterday, such as Alvin Kamara in the third or fourth round rather than Bucky in the second round. But again, I think, you're kind of taking the shot on this guy to take the next step. And I mentioned, I think couple episodes ago that I was pretty down on Achan last year because I didn't fully believe that the efficiency would stick. I'm like, okay, rookie year, it was a fluke. I don't think he's going to be as good sophomore year. So I was down on him last year and he proved me wrong. And I was down on Bucky to begin the year, but I'm thinking, you know what, I gotta kind of put him in this position where we're valuing that upside a little bit. And he was very productive and, not that much opportunities last year. So I think the opportunities improve, and I'm pretty excited for Bucky Irving this year.
Yeah, I think Bucky's a very talented player, and it's a couple of things for me that I mean, I have him 4 spots less than consensus or 5, I guess. It's a couple of things for me that when you get into this top 10, um, everyone aside from Derrick Henry has a PPR upside where they're the clear kind of three down back in that offense. Um, and for me, like you did mention Rashad White. I just am a little scared about his ceiling, Bucky Irving's ceiling and upside with the PPR. I'm sure he's a capable receiving back, but just because Rashad White's such a good and elite receiving back, he's a great blocker as well. Like he's gonna be on the field. So for me, like someone in that backfield, he might not be as efficient of a runner, not even close, but he's going to be on the field used a lot in the offense. And I just think that kind of caps Bucky's receiving upside in a lot of ways, where you're kind of hoping for bigger plays that will come, but I just don't know if it's a, top 8 RB finish without consistent plays in that receiving game. And then the other thing, I know people go back and forth on it a lot, and some people don't think it matters. I'm not really sure how I feel about it, but I do kind of question if he's able to handle like a bell cow volume. In college, I mentioned the stat before. He only went over 20 rushes in a game twice in college. Last year, I don't know how many games he went over 20 rushes, but um, he hasn't seen this heavy workload, which is, when you rank these top 8 guys, everyone there they get that workload. They get that heavy workload, and that's what you expect to be able to produce fantasy points. So for me, I think my ring is more based off of I kind of have to see it. I kind of have to see him be able to handle a workload like this and be as efficient as he was last year. And I just don't want to get burnt on him not being able to handle that, and Rashad White playing more of a role than we think he will. So it's those are kind of things that are just in my mind of that have him kind of sinking in my ranks. That it's just someone that I'd rather not get burned on. And if he pans out, then great for the people that have him. But I just worry about those couple things a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest concern is the snap share. Like if it stays pretty 50-50, that's going to be my biggest concern because I do think the efficiency drops off a little bit. But I'm also anticipating that his snap share increases a little. Uh,
Yep.
But with that being said too, you mentioned PPR, he doesn't have that upside. He had 47 receptions last year. So I think it is there. We just have to see a little bit of that volume and snap share be there for him. Like down the stretch, they're like, oh, we're gonna utilize him, get him over 20 touches a game. But I think we need to see that be a little more consistent heading into next year and the snap share be there as well. So I'm kind of assuming it's gonna happen. That's why I got him up at 9. But I can totally understand why you got him at 13. And I think it makes total sense why we got him here down at 12. Next guy up, another average of 11. We have Jonathan Taylor, who I have at 12. Vinny has at 10. The pros have Jonathan Taylor at 11. So right in line with where we have him. Vinny, go ahead and talk about why you got him up at 10.
Yeah, I've always kind of been a Jonathan Taylor guy since he came to the NFL. I think he's a super talented running back, and this is besides the point of the purpose of these rings. But if he went to another team, I think we could see like a McCaffrey incident where he's just a beast. I think the Colts are really holding him back, but for me, he's just so talented. Even in last year, where many considered like a bust down year. He played 14 games and he was still the RB12. So I mean, he rushed for 1,400 yards in 14 games. So that's just crazy. His rushing ability is absolutely ridiculous. For me, I think him here kind of based on the news of in camp that Daniel Jones seemed to be winning the job. Now in this past week, it seems to be pretty close to even. Richardson's playing a lot better. I do think Jones at quarterback benefits Taylor a lot more just because Jones, while he does have rushing capability, it's not like an Anthony Richardson style where he's looking to rush the ball at all times. So I think with Daniel Jones at quarterback, I might even, rank him higher. But because of that uncertainty, where if Richardson ends up being the quarterback, I could see him falling in my ranks a little bit. But just the talent alone, I think felt like 10 was a good spot for me. Because yeah, such a talented rusher. 1,400 yards in 14 games is pretty ridiculous. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm pretty high on Jonathan Taylor this year.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on the talent. That's kind of the main reason why I don't have him lower. But there's just so many factors that could make me drop him down my rankings.
Mhm.
And I have him at 12. I'm a little bit lower than the pros have him, a little bit lower than consensus. But just looking back at some of his stats from last year, his last three games last year, he had three easy matchups against Tennessee, the Giants, and then the Jacksonville. And he finished at the RB1, the RB1, and RB5. And he scored 47 points, 27 points, and 25 points. Like the guy feasted in his last 3 weeks. And you take those out, it was not a very pretty season overall. Some of these matchups, he's getting the bulk of the share, but he gets a tough matchup against Detroit in week 12, gets 11 carries and only rushes for 35 yards. Tough matchup against the Jets the week prior. 24 carries, but only 57 yards. I don't like the situation for him. Um, I think the Colts are a pretty rough offense, and that's what's holding him back. And their offensive line, they lost a few pieces. I think they lost two pieces that left to go to Minnesota this offseason. I don't think the offensive line's very good. The quarterback situation scares me regardless of who it is, although I would prefer Daniel Jones as well. But I think the offense is just not that good, and the offensive line is scary as well. So I'm a little bit worried for Jonathan Taylor, and unless he's getting an easy matchup, he's really concerning to me. He's not one of these, matchup proof guys, and I'm tempted to put him a little bit lower, but this is kind of the situation where I'm like, all right, at some point I have to say his talent is just too good to not take him. But there's a lot of factors for me that I'm a little worried. Another piece too, you'll see this with some other guys we mentioned today, but he finished at 12 last year in PPR. He had 303 attempts for 1,400 yards and 11 touchdowns, but receiving, he only had 18 receptions. We know he's a capable pass catcher, but 18 receptions for 136 yards, which was a career low, that's concerning. And I know that could improve with Daniel Jones, but this is a touchdown dependent guy who's kind of a pure rusher at this point. And like you said, if he's in a different situation, I'm all in on that. This guy could be so elite. He's top three, but for now, I don't know how I feel about Jonathan Taylor, and that's why I got him a few spots lower.
Yeah, I, the receptions have been comparing the past couple years to the past 2 years. He's had 18 and 19 receptions. So, like during his RB1 year, he had 40 receptions. So that's a big difference. Um, Points scored. But yeah, I just think that, he's such a talented rusher that if they decide to involve him more in the passing game, where another big reason for me that I like him is that there's no one else there that can compete with him. I know people are kind of hyping up DJ Giddens because they did draft him this year, but it's Jonathan Taylor's job. Unless there's an injury, DJ Giddens could become relevant, but I don't know. There's no one else there, so I like to hope there would be a bump in reception in the receiving game, but you're right. You never know. The history of the past 2 years hasn't proved that there will be. So I
Yeah.
get the concern.
And also like his snap share, he is the guy. He has been like he was averaging over probably it looks like on the season over 80% on the season snap share. So he's the guy. He's going to continue to be too. I'm not worried about Giddens, but yeah, it's just he feels just so touchdown dependent. It concerns me a little bit at least.
That's fair.
Um, sorry, did you say something?
No, I just said that's fair.
Okay. Yeah. So RB10, we with another average of 11, we both have at 11. That's Kyron Williams. Kyron Williams falls into number 12 for the pros. So we are both a spot higher in our own rankings, and then in our consensus ranking, we are two spots higher. So Kyron Williams is an interesting one. I think, I'll pull up his stats here. He kind of feels also a little bit similar to Jonathan Taylor in the fact that he's touchdown dependent. He finished at both seven in both the past 2 years in PPR. He had 316 attempts last year, 1,200, almost 1,300 yards last year, 14 touchdowns. He had 12 touchdowns a year prior, 34 receptions for 182 yards, two touchdowns last year. So the receiving game's not really there. The game log, we look at it, he's getting every snap. He's around 90% snap share, maybe a little bit less in some games, but he's getting everything. And he was pretty consistent. He had only one game in single digits. So for me, even though he had a lot of games where it was like lower double digits, I just feel like he's more consistent. And I got him above Jonathan Taylor also for the fact that he plays for the Rams and not the Colts. The Rams are a better offense. I think most people would agree with that. So I'm in the boat here with Kyron where it's like, all right, he's coming off two back-to-back seasons of RB7 overall. And yeah, maybe he is a little touchdown dependent, but he is their guy. I don't really see Blake Corum stepping in like some people believe. Or I think they drafted somebody or something like
Yep.
there's
Yep.
another guy.
Jarquez Hunter.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Hunter. I think he was a late pick for them. So, I'm just not worried about these other running backs. I think it's still Kyron's team. Again, he feels a little bit touchdown dependent, but with some consistency and playing for the Rams, I got him a spot higher than I do with Jonathan Taylor. So that's why I got him there.
Yeah, Iron Williams is an interesting one. Just because he's been so effective and productive in fantasy. You mentioned top or 7 overall finishes at the RB position. Um, so the production's there, and I guess we can call him touchdown dependent. But if you just he has 12 and 13 touchdowns. Like if you just keep scoring touchdowns, it's just
Yeah.
more that he's just a touchdown scorer. The thing with him that like I couldn't really put him higher is I'm not like you mentioned Blake Corum, Jarquez Hunter. It's not that I'm worried about the guys, but I'm more worried about the direction that the team seems to be taking. Like he is in a contract year. They haven't paid him yet, and they drafted Blake Corum in the second round, a year after the 7 overall finish for Kyron Williams. And then they traded up in the fourth round, and there's that viral video of Sean McVay saying, "This is the one guy I wanted in day three. Like this is who we wanted." And they traded up in the fourth to get Jarquez Hunter. So, like, regardless of what you think of them, they clearly don't just want to give everything to Kyron Williams. They have some sort of plan to involve these guys. Um, so that's what worries me a little bit is that I can see his snap share going down. And then that, as a like you mentioned, being touchdown dependent, that could be true, and that could just mean that his touchdown totals go down. And so, I don't know. I am a little. I'm not worried necessarily about the talent, but Sean McVay. We saw what happened with Todd Gurley, where that was more due to injuries, but like we saw what happened with what's his name on the Rams. He was Cam Akers. We saw what happened with him. He had one good year, then he kind of got phased out. So I mean, I don't know. It's in my ranking that I couldn't put him higher is mostly based off of what the Rams did the past couple off seasons, and they did address the RB position when you based on Kyron Williams' production, you'd think they wouldn't have to or wouldn't need to. So that's what scares me a little bit.
Yeah, I think I would feel a lot better if they got that contract extension done. At
Yeah,
that point, I'm maybe even ranking him a little higher than at 11.
same here.
But
Yeah,
yeah, I can agree with you. And I think, it's tough to put him too low though. Off of back-to-back RB7 seasons and being as consistent as he was, you can't take that away from him. So I think we got him in a good spot here, and I think we're both in agreement pretty much on how we feel about Kyron Williams.
yeah,
At the RB9 spot with an average of 9.5 between the two of us, we have Josh Jacobs, who I have at 10 and Vinny has at 9. The pros have him at 10. So we are one spot higher than the pros. Um, Josh Jacobs. So I just want to start here to preface Josh Jacobs is kind of this third guy in this tier for me where it's like Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams, and Jonathan Taylor. These three are, to me, elite running backs, but they're all three of them are touchdown dependent and not doing much in the receiving game. Jacobs finished at 6 last year. First year in Green Bay, 301 attempts, 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns, 36 receptions for 342 yards and a touchdown. So I think both him and Kyron have slightly more receiving upside. I think Jacobs has the most between the three of them. Jacobs also had the most rushing touchdowns between the three of them with 15. But I think they're all kind of similar to me. The reason though why I'm a little bit higher on Jacobs than the other two, I like the Packers offense and I like the fact that they run through him. They did last year, and I think that's their plan again, honestly. So I'm kind of excited for Jacobs. I think the touchdowns drop off of 15 for sure. But there's minimal receiving upside for him too, and there's something there. Even if it's not a lot, there's something. So I kind of like Jacobs, and we know he can finish highly. He finished at 3 couple years ago in Vegas, and then just looking at what he did last year, he had also one single digit game where he had 5 points against the Tennessee Titans in week 3, which okay, you might be a little concerned, but he was low snap percentage too until later in the season where he was getting closer to 80. He was in the 60s most of the season. So, if they're like, "Oh, we really do want to run it through this guy," they're going to increase that snap percentage for him, and I think he's going to get a lot of opportunities again.
Yeah, no, Jacobs had a great year last year. And while like you do point out the stats of his receiving games, he as a person who watched most of their games, it might have not showed in necessarily the receptions category, but he was used a lot in just in terms of running routes, more than I think a lot of people expected him to be last year. There was kind of that whole thing where he had never had a receiving touchdown. He had the most routes run for anyone who hadn't had a receiving touchdown. So he finally got that receiving touchdown. But it was clear that the Packers wanted to involve him in the receiving game, and no one else really in their backfield has, ability to do that. There is some hype around, their second round pick from a couple of years ago, Marshawn Lloyd, who was out injured all of last year. Um, I do see them trying to utilize him a little bit, but just how efficient and productive Jacobs was last year, he's clearly the goal line back. He's obviously a capable receiving back. So I see somewhat of a similar role as he had last year, which produced that 6 overall finish. So I mean, yeah, pretty high on Jacobs. Like you said, the Packers offense remains basically the same. They added Matthew Golden, but that doesn't affect Jacobs as much. So yeah, it's a similar offense. Matt LaFleur loved to use them. So yeah, I predict another good year from Jacobs, and 10 feels like or 9 feels like a good spot for him.
Yeah, the O-line is pretty good too. And they brought in, I forget the name of the guard, but they brought in a guard from San Francisco, I believe.
Yeah, I'm blanking on the name as well.
They paid him a lot of money. Aaron Banks, I believe.
Yep,
Aaron
yep,
Banks. They paid him a lot of money. And then they also, I believe, just paid Zach Tom as well.
yep.
So,
High
they're
speed offensive tackle. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they got a pretty solid O line,
Mhm.
so I think that's another factor too when factoring in, okay, although the Rams offense is elite, I'd probably say the Packers O line is better than the Rams O line. So, take all these things into consideration, the contract too. We know Jacobs is under contract and they paid him a lot when they brought him into Green Bay. So,
Yep.
yeah, I think this is a pretty good spot for him. We're in pretty much agreement here. We got a couple more guys coming up where we're a little bit in agreement. Um, RB8, another guy who you could argue is touchdown dependent with an average of 8 because both of us have him at 8. That's Derrick Henry. The pros have him at 7, so we're one spot lower than the pros got him. Derrick Henry's an interesting name. Derrick Henry is now going into what his age. 31
31.
season.
Yep.
And yet he nothing ends. He doesn't stop. It's incredible. Nobody's like Derrick Henry. Last year he finished at RB4 first year in Baltimore, 325 attempts. He's still getting everything. 1,900 yards, his second best rushing total of his career. And he
Yep.
had 16 touchdowns, which was tied for his second best of his career. Receptions, there's not much to like there. 19 receptions, 193 yards, but two receiving touchdowns. I guess that's not bad. He he rushed the most efficiently of his career last year with 5.9 a pop. So there's a lot to like for Derrick Henry. I know in a PPR league, there's not much to like in the receiving game, but looking at his stats last year, he was matchup proof. He had, again, another guy with only one game in single digits, and that was when he only had 46% of snaps in week 15 against the Giants. Um, had he scored a touchdown, he's going over that double digit mark. But he just had so many weeks where he was just carrying the rock and they're winning games, and that's gonna be the recipe for success. Even though he was kind of close to 55-ish snap percentage all year. Like it wasn't amazing. Um, but here we are with this guy who's just rushing at an elite clip at the age of 30. And then
Yep.
I also want to mention his last 3 weeks, just because his snap percentage was a little bit higher, was at 74, 65, and 70. And they were tough matchups. It was Pittsburgh, Houston, and Cleveland, three good defenses. And he put up 24 for 162, 27 for 147 and one, and then 20 for 138 and two. Like this guy he just gets it done. And I think the reason why I'm the highest on him of this group of guys who we could argue are all kind of touchdown dependent, almost pure rushers, the reason I'm highest is because I think the Ravens are the best team of this group. And when you're winning football games, you hand the ball off. So I think they're going to hand the ball off a lot to Derrick Henry again, even if that snap percentage is fairly low. And it's kind of hard to argue at this point that, oh, this is the year the cliff is he's falling off because it doesn't come for this guy. So I think if anything, the snap percentage might be better for him because we saw him be the most efficient he was ever last year. So yeah, I'm kind of in on Derrick Henry. I think this is a pretty solid spot, even if we're one spot lower than the pros on him.
Yeah. No, I mean, him and Lamar are one of the most deadly duos that you could see on a field
Yeah.
just because it's impossible to stop. Like, if they want to do a read option or whatever it is, like they're running you over and Derrick Henry will run you over. But I mean, yeah, I love Derrick Henry at this spot. Honestly, willing to draft him. I almost, now that we're talking about him and I've been thinking about it, the guy that we're going to talk about next, I almost want to swap him with Derrick Henry just because he's been so consistent. And honestly, I think part of my ranking him one spot below this guy, next guy we're going to talk about is because of the baked in factor that he's 31 years old. And like, it's just that thought of like, at some point this has to stop. But like you said, he just had his most efficient running season he's had in his 8, 9 year career. So, I mean, I almost feel like it's disrespectful to bake in an age argument with him because he's just one of those Chimera like unicorns that, yeah, I think he'll do it until he can't anymore and he'll go out on top as a top 10 running back in the league. So I don't know. He just seems to keep being able to do it. And this offense is great for him as a running back and a fantasy running back. So, you know, at least the guy ahead of him I may consider moving, but the guys in the next tier that we're going to get into, I just feel like have so much more all around upside that this is about as high as Derrick Henry can go for me.
Yeah, I also just wanted to look up real quick the depth chart until there's another guy there where they can say, oh, Derrick Henry's going to be our goal line back, and that's going to be how we run this offense. The next guy up is Justice Hill. He is not taking away carries from from Derrick Henry. So I think I think the biggest thing for me though is that age and the guy I have next who why don't we segue right into it at RB7 we have Chase Brown with an average of 7. Both of us have him at 7. We have him 2 spots above the pros who have him down at 9. I think I just love the upside for Chase Brown and the PPR upside with that, right? Like Derrick Henry's a pure rushing back, and he was the most efficient last year, but at some point that's going to come down a little bit. Um, Looking at last year, Chase Brown finished at 10th with only 229 carries, 990 yards, 7 touchdowns, but he had 54 receptions for 360 yards and 4 touchdowns. Also, he became very productive once Zach Moss went down and he started getting everything. So his snap share was above the 80s from week 9 on. So that's really encouraging to me. The PPR upside is really encouraging to me. They just cut Zach Moss actually. So, I think just the opportunity this guy is going to get with a PPR floor, like when he had 80% snap share or more, his two worst weeks were 13 points. And he still had 18 for 91, 20 for 67, couple catches. He had couple games, 26 points apiece, 24 points, 22 points, two at 19 points each. Like this guy's just really good with the opportunity. And they had talked all offseason, oh, we're gonna bring in a guy. They didn't. I think Chase Brown's a guy there. And even the offensive coordinators in camp are saying, oh, this guy could be our Austin Eckler. Like this guy can do it all. So just seeing what he did in when he took over full time last year is what's really encouraging to me. And again, we talk about Derrick Henry being on an amazing offense and he's going to get the opportunities that way. Chase Brown's on the Bengals. That offense is going to have a ton of opportunities. And I think that, again, feeds into him having opportunities himself and scoring touchdowns. So I'm really in on Chase Brown this year. And I was debating how high I could go with him. I think this was a good spot for him. But yeah, I love Chase Brown this year. I'm really excited to see him play.
Yeah, I was referring to the guy we're going to talk about next, and obviously it's Chase Brown, but the reason I have him above Derrick Henry is just like you said, I'm so in on him. I mean, I don't think many people would argue with you if you said the Bengals have the best offense in the league. And I think that's like I believe that they have the best offense in the league. Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and you throw in Chase Brown as what now seems to be their bell cow back and three down back because, cutting Zach Moss might not seem like a big deal just because, oh, Zach Moss was terrible last year and he got beat out. But like that just proves that they're fully in on Chase Brown. Samaje Perine and they just drafted a guy, Taj Brooks, are the only guys in that room. So everything's going to Chase Brown. It's going to be an elite offense. And like you mentioned his stats from last year. That's in the year one where, there wasn't much of a plan for Chase Brown. The plan was to be a split off the bat. He ended up pretty quickly taking that over. So now it's a full offseason where, they planning for him as their RB1. And I expect a massive season. I think this is a sneaky guy that he has RB1 overall upside. I mean, if everything goes right, he has that kind of Kamara McCaffrey ability where he does everything. So that might be an extremely hot take, but I think, both of us having him at 7, this is a territory where any of these guys we talk about have a realistic opportunity to finish as the RB1 overall. So, yeah, super excited about Chase Brown.
Yeah, I don't think it's a super hot take, honestly. Like if you
Yeah.
into one of those guys, Austin Eckler, they're talking about. So I'm
Yep.
not I'm not worried about Taj Brooks either. Uh,
No.
I think there's some talk about it, but what's he, a change of pace guy occasionally? Like it's Chase Brown's backfield. It's all
Yep.
him.
Yep.
Um, the one thing I will say about Chase Brown is it seems like he's starting to be a community favorite. And if that's the case, his ADP will rise drastically. So just be careful of where he starts to go in drafts. If he's going beginning of the second round, that's really early. So just keep that in mind, see how high he goes, how high the community starts to value him, because I think we're one of many people who are in on this guy. So
Yep.
it's just something to keep in mind. But yeah, there's not a lot of negatives to talk about with Chase Brown here, and he's going to be a fun player this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing to point out, but honestly, for someone like Chase Brown, or if you genuinely believe someone has top of their position overall upside as a finish, I don't really think there's a spot too high for you to pick them. Like like you know what I mean? That if like I believe that I wouldn't mind picking him in the early second round, mid second round. Like that might sound like a hot take, but after all these names that we're about to talk about next are gone, he's next up for me. I don't really care what the team build is. So yeah, like you said, it is unless he creeps into the first round, then I think it gets a little out of control. But for someone with his type of upside for me, I don't really think there's too much that I'm watching in terms of ADP.
Yeah. I think it's just concerning to me because I think some people are going to start taking him above some of these guys we have ranked higher.
Think so? Yeah.
That's my biggest worry. But then again, like, if we have these guys ranked higher, they become a value for us if they
Mhm.
fall a few spots too.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah, play the board. But just keep in mind he's becoming a fan favorite throughout the community. So it's just something to consider. Next guy up, we both have at six. So an average of six is Devon Achan. And he is also at six for the pros. So we've been a little bit in line with each other and with the pros. He finished this past season at RB5 overall, only 203 attempts, but 907 yards, six touchdowns. But you know, the PPR is where this guy shines. 78 receptions, 592 yards, six touchdowns. Jonnu Smith is now gone out of that offense, which could open up the door for him to get even more receptions. Last year, his snap share 60s, couple games in the 70s, nothing too crazy, but this guy produced like his highest rushing attempt game, he had 22 attempts. There were a lot of games where he was between 10 and 12. Like he was not getting a ton of carries, but we look at his receiving totals, and I'm pretty sure when Tua was healthy, his numbers were even better. But like, actually, do me a favor, look up how when Tua was playing last year, what weeks he played.
Yeah,
It-
no, I actually know that I know what you're talking about. And when Tua
yeah,
and him played together, he was the number one. He was RB1, and in points per game, he was RB1 as well. So yeah,
yeah. I don't know what weeks he was healthy, but when Tua was healthy, this guy was putting up points and getting a
yep,
ton of targets. I know he had 7 and 7 in weeks 1 and 2. He had down the stretch, middle of the season when Tua started coming back, 8, 8, 5, 4, 4, 9, 7, 7, 7. And then the last 2 weeks he didn't have much at all. But with Tua, he's getting a ton of targets and it's turning
yep,
into this really good game for a receiver. And he's doing it as a running back with some extra bonus as a rusher. So I think it's just he's a unique player that you have to be in on. And as long as Tua is healthy, you're getting like this is arguably to me, he could easily be the RB1 overall. Like he did this he was RB5 with 203 rushing attempts. And with Tua hurt for a little bit, he still finished the season with 87 targets. And they turned over to say, oh, Jonnu Smith is going to be our focal point of this offense. So I think it's really exciting that Jonnu Smith is gone because I don't think Waller's going to be much for them. And I also think it's really exciting that Tua is going into a year healthy and he's more removed from the head injuries and everything. So I love Achan this year and I would be thrilled to get him.
yeah. No, definitely, like you said, another guy that wouldn't be surprised at all. And I think he has a great chance to finish as the RB1 overall. You mentioned those numbers with Tua and him playing together, and obviously, you can't predict that Tua will play every game this year, but he is coming into the season healthy. So when those two are on the field together, it's fantasy heaven. I have had HN as in a few leagues last year. But yeah, the receiving upside is where his potential comes into play. And like for the people that, aren't drafting him because of the fact that, oh, Tua might go down. Well, I think you could say the same thing about McCaffrey, but everyone loves McCaffrey that like, McCaffrey could get hurt. Well, oh, then I won't draft him. Well, Tua could get hurt, then I'm not going to draft HN. I don't know. I don't like not drafting guys based off of, other people getting hurt. I think it's something to consider. But in HN's case, we're not talking about him being hurt. We're talking about his quarterback being hurt. So even if Tua does go down, he's still a very capable talent. Like he's, faster than everyone on the field, still could get receiving work. But Yeah, I love everything about HN. And I almost wanted to put him higher, but these next few guys are just, again, so talented that it's just such a top heavy group where there's so many good talents on the board.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that. Like, oh well, Tua could get hurt. Yeah, well, so could literally any other player in the like
Yeah,
it's a contact sport. I know there's more concern about Tua and the head injuries. What could that mean? But um I wanna say they brought in Zach Wilson as their backup quarterback this year.
they did. Yep.
And that is a huge improvement, in my opinion, from whoever they had. Like, I think the Jets ruined careers. Like, truthfully, we see Sam Darnold go have success over in Minnesota last year. Who else has been really bad? Rodgers had the worst year of his career last year in New York. I think somehow he's going to be better this year. It's just like some of these quarterbacks they're drafting. Zach Wilson was number 2 overall pick, and he was a bust because he played for the Jet. I think he's a competent enough quarterback, especially for Achane, where they're saying, hey, Zach, all you have to do is dump it down to Achane. He's going to do that and he's going to thrive. And I think Achane's going to thrive. So I like the situation. I like the backup plan for Tua if, something were to happen to his head again. So I think he's in a fine spot and you can take him. I wouldn't even argue if you took him in the first. I'll be so real.
And honestly, the upside of rushing, I feel like there should be more rushing touchdowns last year. Obviously, like 2 years ago, Raheem Mostert had that ridiculous year where he pushed 20 rushing touchdowns. I think he had 20 rushing touchdowns, and he was there last year. Obviously, didn't play much of a role, but this year it's Jalen Wright that's going to get those opportunities. And I don't know. I feel like Jalen Wright is not the clear goal line back over HN. So we could see HN get more goal line opportunities and see those rushing numbers creep up, which already has the receiving upside there. If the rushing numbers creep up, that's an RB1 overall
Yeah.
finish. So
Yeah.
yeah,
On exactly 100 more attempts from his rookie year to his sophomore year, he had 2 less touchdowns. So we could bounce right back up. I know he
yep,
had like an insanely efficient 7.7 yards a carry his
yep,
rookie year, but he's still 4.47 last year. Like that's still really, really good.
yep,
So I think yeah, he's not one of these guys who's going to get a million carries like some of the other names we've mentioned, Derrick Henry, Jacobs, Kyron, Jonathan Taylor, but he can do so much with less rushing um, opportunities, and he has all that pass catching capabilities and opportunities he gets instead. So
yep, exactly.
yeah, PPR, a reception is a full point, and a rush doesn't count for anything. So keep that in mind too.
Yep,
RB5, averaging out to 4.5. We have Ashton Genty, who I have at 5. Vinny has at 4. Pros have him at 5. Um, yeah, Genty. I don't have stats with me. Genty's an interesting one. I think Genty was just so good in college and now comes into a system with Pete Carroll and an offense that's improving now that they got Geno Smith at quarterback. I think Genty's a pure 3 down workhorse. I think his snap share is going to be so high. I think he can catch the ball. I think he's an efficient runner. So I'm just really excited to see this guy on the field and doing everything. I think there is possibly argument to drop him down because, some of these other guys like Achan has that PPR upside who could do more. I mean, the Raiders aren't the best team even still if they're improving. But yeah, I think Genty's just going to get so much work that it's kind of hard to rank him any lower at this point. Like you
yep,
draft Genty, you're getting a bona fide RB1. It feels like drafting Saquon when he was a rookie. I remember like being in a keeper league and nobody kept anybody or everybody kept someone, which at the time it was like you keep someone, they go in the first round for you. You keep a second guy, they're your second round pick. And that's how it worked rather than like, oh, you had a keeper and you draft and you keep them at their value they were drafted at. So everybody kept somebody except for me. And I was the only one with the first round pick, and rookies can't get kept. So Saquon was on the board. I took Saquon Barkley, and it was a lot of fun. It kind of feels like that situation where it's like, okay, you're getting this guy you know is going to be productive, and it's a 3 down back, first round pick. Sure, go for it. Because I think Pete Carroll's going to want to run the ball a lot. what do they have? Raheem Mostert behind him. Like Mostert's what, 32, something like
Yeah.
that. I just I think it's his backfield. I think it's all his. I think he's going to get so many opportunities. He's just going to work his way into that RB5 position.
Yeah, love Genti. I have him, one spot ahead of the guy that we're going to talk about next, just because, every year there's a rookie running back that just seems to finish top five every year, and that just pushes that, next level and becomes a household name. And he has everything in the equation that you need for that to happen. He was a top 10 pick, six overall. When a running back goes in the first round, they're a pretty talented player because that kind of rarely happens. It happens, almost every year, but only once in the first round usually. So there was a couple guys this year, but Genti was the obvious first one off the board. And I could see him pushing close to 300 carries. Like that would not surprise me at all. So in that case, I definitely think he surpasses that 1,200-yard mark that no rookie has done since Saquon. The touchdowns will come. Like you said, there's not much competition to do anything. We've already seen clips of him, running routes at camp, being involved in the passing game. So I think there's upside in that facet of his game too. Improved quarterback play with Geno Smith there. There are targets on the field with Bowers, Myers, and Besh, but you know, he's the only running back on the field that I think, can command a lot of targets as well when the time comes for that. So yeah, I mean, it seems like an easy RB1 finish. I would be absolutely, you know, surprised if he wasn't an RB1 this year, let alone possibly the RB1 overall. So, yeah, love Genti this year. Definitely looking to get him in the first round, end of the first round, anytime I can.
Yeah, and just to name a couple other running backs who have been drafted in the top 10 in recent years, Bijan, and that was 2024. Bijan was drafted in the first round, and he was considered a down year as a rookie
Yeah.
at and finished at RB9.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then you had Saquon, who I mentioned in 2018. I forget where he finished, but it was very high. And then Zeke in 2016, who also finished very high. Like, if you're a
Yeah.
running back drafted in the top 10 of the NFL draft, you end up just being really productive. And I see that happening with Genti.
Yeah, those names, like those are like fantasy legends. That
Yeah.
Bijan's the number one overall, or could be he's a top two overall pick this year. So I mean, he's in really good company. It would have to be an epic failure for him to not produce an RB1 finish. So yeah, everything's in his favor right now. He just has to go out on the field and produce.
Mhm. Yeah, the next guy up we're going to talk about is as our RB4, average of four, is Christian McCaffrey, who I have up at three. Vinny has down at five. Um, Pros got him at four, so right in line with us. McCaffrey's an interesting one for me. We know what he can be as long as he's healthy. In his fully healthy seasons, outside of his rookie year. He's had, so let's take out his rookie year, all right? Just for this example. 4 years he's been fully healthy. 3 years he has not, and he hasn't played any more than 7 games in those 3 years. Those were disasters. He was a bust. Finished his best was when he played 7 games and finished at RB 38. That's still a disaster. In his 4 healthy years, though, outside of his rookie year, he has finished at the RB2, the RB1, the RB2, and the RB1. He kind of feels like Josh Allen, where you're getting a top two running back, and as long as he's healthy, you are getting that production. So it's one of these situations where, I kind of feel like they rushed him back last year, and that's why he wasn't as good as he was. And then he only played 4 games, wasn't that good, but the guy gets a ton of carries, rushes for a ton of yards, scores touchdowns, and then PPR, we've talked about it with Achane, but he has this massive upside. His first year in San Francisco, he had 108 targets, 85 receptions as a running back, 741 yards, 5 touchdowns, along with 1,130 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns. Like it's just so hard to get production that McCaffrey does. And I guess going into age 29 season, it's a little starting to get to that age where it's like, okay, maybe this production starts to fall off. But then again, the strength of schedule, the Niners have the best strength of schedule. You're winning games. What do? Hand the ball off. And also that PPR upside. That defense is not as good as it used to be. So honestly, I think they're gonna have to do a lot more as an offense as a whole, which could mean check it down, which could mean run the ball. And the receivers are very different this year. So outside of George Kittle, you don't have much consistency in that realm. So I'm back in on Christian McCaffrey. I really am. I I think I couldn't get him higher than 3 for my rankings overall. But yeah, I'm fully back in, and as long as he's healthy, you're getting a top two guy. That's kind of the only thing you're banking on is that health, and there's a lot of risk drafting McCaffrey, but I'd take him arguably in the top 5 if you really wanted to.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all. I really think that the only thing separating him and Genty for him in my ranks is the fact that, if you do a pros and cons list in my head, it's all pros for Genty right now for me. And, McCaffrey obviously has that overhanging, worry of the injury that you mentioned. And I think it is, like we just talked about, you don't ever want to predict injuries, but with someone with his injury history, last season was so weird where he was the number one pick in fantasy drafts, and then randomly they were like, "Oh, he's actually scratched from week one," and then it turned into this whole thing where so that was just such a weird situation where no one expected it at all. That you can never be truly sure. But this season, it seems that everything's going well. He looks great in camp, and like you mentioned, when he's on the field, he's RB1 overall. Like you don't have to worry about it. So, I think it also is a different situation where he's getting older, the injury history is there, but at the same time, this isn't the same Niners team in years past where you're expecting a playoff run. Like their defense is in trouble. They lost a lot of pieces. Um, you know, Ayuk's on the IL to begin the season, most likely. So we don't know what the offense is going to necessarily. They lost Debo. It's going to be a little different, a bit of a Niners team. But this is a team that they now need McCaffrey to win games. They can't just bank on resting him, be like, oh, we're going to make the playoffs. Let's ease back his usage. No, they need him as much on the field as much as they possibly can in order to win games and push for the playoffs. So I think it's a different year where we don't really have to worry as much about usage if he's healthy because they're going to need him to win games.
Mhm. Yeah, and he's coming back healthy. So,
Yeah.
at the same time, real quick before we move on, last year you spent the number one overall pick on McCaffrey.
Yeah.
This year, some people are passing on him so much that he's going in the second round.
Hmm.
There's a lot of discount. It's just know your league mates. Do they like him? Do they not? I know in one of my leagues, I got a Niners fan in there, and he's been sending us clips of McCaffrey all off season. I don't know if it's smoke, honestly. I don't know if he's trying to bait us, but I'm gonna take that and consider that the fact that he's probably in on McCaffrey, meaning wherever he's drafting, I have to understand that he's probably going there. But yeah, just know your league, and you could potentially get a huge discount on McCaffrey.
Yeah. Yeah.
RB3 coming in at an average of 3 is Jahmyr Gibbs. I have down at 4, right below McCaffrey, and Vinny has him up at 2. So we are actually, you're right in line with the pros, but my ranking brought him right below for us. So he's number 2 with the pros. So I guess technically we're one spot lower. Go ahead and talk about why you got him at 2.
Yeah, for me, I just the floor is so high, and then the upside for more if Montgomery ever went down, or if he just starts to have a lesser role. The floor is so high. I mean, I know you'll probably mention the last 3 weeks in which he kind of exploded, scored close to like 80 fantasy points in 3 weeks or something like that, something
It was
ridiculous.
almost 100.
Yeah, a ridiculous amount of points. But at the same time, I was looking into it, and during that one week 1 to 15 stretch, he was still RB4 in points per game. He had, I think he averaged almost 20 points per game during that stretch as well. So to me, that's his floor. That he was doing that with Montgomery on the field, scoring double-digit touchdowns, and so I'm very comfortable drafting him at the or having him at the 2 spot in my rankings just because we know what he can do. And in the situation that there could be more, he's easily the RB1 overall in my eyes. So, yeah, the floor is so high and that there could also be upside. I'm just super excited about him and would take him kind of anywhere in the first outside of like the top three, I would say.
Yeah, he's consistent, but he's not booming, which is why I'm slightly lower on him when Montgomery's out there. Like he's very consistent. He has a floor, but the ceiling's really capped with Montgomery out there. So, he's getting you double-digit fantasy points, but you're never getting that boom week that you could get from Achan, that probably from Genty, McCaffrey, certainly. So some of these guys behind him, I think there's just more potential, but it's really hard to say, say Montgomery now he's hitting the age of, I think, 28. So if they turn a leaf and say we want it to be 60-40 Gibbs favor rather than this 50-50 that it looked like last year, that could prove to be really valuable for Gibbs. And you can't put him any lower than I think the top five at the least because this guy has, as you said, a really high floor. It's just where do you think his ceiling's going to be? Because I think regardless of the situation, say they go 50-50 split, say it's even 60-40 in Montgomery's favor, say that's the situation. I think his floor and PPR value alone will still have him finish as a RB1 overall. But his points per game were lower with Montgomery on the field to the fact I think if I'm not wrong, he was RB12 in points per game when Montgomery's out there. So there's a little bit concern out there for me with that within that regard, which is why I wanted to put McCaffrey above him and these next two guys we're about to mention. But yeah, like you said, he's an electric player and his floor is through the roof.
You.
Number two, average of 2.5. Saquon Barkley, I have at 2. Vinny has at 3. He is number 3 with the pros. Yeah, Saquon. I feel like this is kind of just really straightforward, right? Like he finished at RB2 last year with his first year in Philly. Um, yeah, number 2 overall, 345 attempts, 2,000 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns, 33 receptions, 278 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So that's not there that much. Um, but you look at like this game log, and he had so many boom weeks where he was just going off. He's the only guy. He's getting around 80% of the snaps all season long. And he was just so good as a running back last year. You put him behind now the best offensive line in the league once again, and a very good team that's going to win football games. Even if their strength of schedule is a little bit harder, it's still running through Saquon Barkley, this offense. So it's like, I am not willing to spend a top four pick on him, just because he is kind of that rushing and touchdown dependent running back, but the Eagles are just so good. They won the Super Bowl last year, and the offense might even need to do more now with the schedule being harder and with that defense losing some pieces. So maybe that means the PPR and the receptions get a little bit boost there. I don't think he reaches 2,000 yards again. I'll be very honest there, but he's just so good, and he was so good last year with Philly. It's really hard to rank him any lower.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with this top three. But for me, Saquon, it's crazy to think about that. He had 13 touchdown rushing touchdowns last year. It's crazy to think that that number could go up. Jalen Hurts had 15 of his own rushing touchdowns. If say some of those go Saquon's way instead, which is very possible, or it could be the other way around. But either way, there's variance for those touchdowns to go other ways, and that could mean Saquon's total goes up. It is crazy to think about. I do think that maybe his usage gets cut back a little bit, just because the Eagles have now turned into this team that they're going to be a perennial Super Bowl contender as long as they keep this squad together, and it's essentially the same team, at least offense, as last year. So I do see his usage going down a little bit as they kind of play maybe similar to like a Chiefs style where they're preparing to just win games and prepare for the playoffs, which, unfortunately does affect fantasy. So, but other than that, that's the only worry I have about Saquon. It's a match made in heaven that, like you mentioned, the offensive line is so elite. Him and Hurts are similar to Lamar and Derrick Henry, where they're kind of unstoppable. So Yeah, I predict another massive year for Saquon. I just worry a little bit about his usage and that carry total going down a little bit this year.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern is I've mentioned a number of guys who have had only one single digit game this year or this past year. Saquon had three. Um, the reason he got so high is because he had so many boom weeks. He had 33 in week one, 36 in week three, 26 in week seven, 32 in week nine, 33 in week 11, 54 in week 12, 30 in week 16. Like that's absurd. And the fact that he can do that is why he's so exciting. But yeah, I think he's a little bit more of a volatile player. And so even being in this offense, you have to be aware that you're going to have some weeks where he'll probably be in the single digits, just like he did this past year. But you're
Yep.
also going to get those 50-point weeks along with it.
Yep.
All right, and at number one, we both have him there, and so do the pros. It's Bijan Robinson. Bijan, man, Bijan is elite. Bijan, I think I saw something last year that like he's been averaging like 17 a game, like he's super consistent. Um he had no single digit games this past year. He had a slow start, but then he had 5 straight weeks of over 21 points. Then he finished out the season with doing really well. Also, he gets all the carries. He's the guy there. It actually they gave him more carries as the season went on, more snap share. He finished at three last year, 304 attempts, almost 1,500 rushing yards, 14 touchdowns, 61 receptions, 431 yards, and one receiving touchdown. I think this team now going into year two with this new head coach and offensive coordinator, I think they know that this team has to run through Bijan. And, we'll talk about receivers in another episode, but outside of Drake London, what do they have for receivers? It's Drake London and injured currently, Darnell Mooney, and then Kyle Pitts, who still hasn't proven anything. So this team is running through him. It kind of feels like McCaffrey with the Niners, where there's George Kittle, but what else do they have? It has to run through McCaffrey. Feels the same way here. And I think Bijan is just an elite rusher. He's been working out with Saquon, I think, this offseason. And actually, who is the other guy working out with him? McCaffrey, maybe? I don't know. But some of these top end guys are working out together. And Saquon said it himself, like, oh, nobody cuts like Bijan. I saw a clip the other day. I think ESPN posted it. And
Yep.
the dude, his body didn't move and his feet were
Yeah.
going back and it was it
Yep.
was it was insane to watch. I know it's a little drill as a running back, but he's such a smooth runner. He is now going into his well, he's 23 right now. He might be 24 when the season starts, but he is hitting that prime peak running back season. I think Bijan's going to be so consistent, and you know what you're getting out of him too. So whereas Saquon was a little more volatile, Bijan, you know you're getting a good score every single week. So
Yep.
I'm very in on Bijan. I think you could take him number one overall if you'd like. I wouldn't fault you for that at all.
Yeah, that's what I was going to lead with is that I don't think there's enough conversation happening that, he should be the number one overall pick in fantasy drafts. I think for a lot of people, it's just been overall rankings that Jamar's the smash pick just because, he did have, it's not for no reason. The guy had one of the best receiving seasons ever, but I think Bijan's in line to possibly have one of the best running back seasons ever. It's fine. It seems like, yeah, as you were hinting at, it seems like the year that like he finally puts it all together, which is crazy to think about that he had almost 1,500 rushing yards last year and 60 something receptions that we're saying he could finally put it all together, that he hasn't even reached his ceiling. That's just a
Yeah.
ridiculous thought. And then also the quarterback situation. He was dealing with terrible quarterback play his whole career. I mean, only 2 years, but to this point, then, now with Penix, who seems a little more competent, we don't know yet from him, but it seems very clear, like you mentioned, that they want to run it through Bijan. And that was very clear, at least almost all of last year, but especially towards the end, that they finally realized that, oh, yeah, this guy we spent the eighth overall pick on can help us win football games when we give him the ball. They finally realized that and put it all together. So now that the offense has it all put together, I think we see, Bijan's best year of his career. And easily could finish as the RB1. My favorite right now to finish as the RB1, obviously both of ours with our rank of number one, but yeah, it's just crazy to think that this guy is upside based on the season he
Yeah,
has last year.
yeah, upside.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, I'm just looking at his games last year. He feasted on the really bad teams, but he also had some good games against tougher teams. And then let me talk about these last 3 weeks when Penix was the quarterback. Um, all easy defenses. I get that. Same thing has been talked about when we talk about Drake London. The Giants, Washington, and then Carolina. But what this guy did in those 3 weeks was 24, 24, and 31 points. He had 22 for 94 and two, 17 for 90 and two, 28 for 170 and two. The receiving numbers were not there. I guess you could be a little bit concerned about that. They were down compared to the rest of the season. But I think the fact that he's just the guy and he's getting everything and putting up crazy numbers and scoring touchdowns, Penix is going to have to check it down to him at some point. What are you going to keep throwing the ball to Ray McLeod? No, you're not. You're gonna get the ball to your best players. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy to see those numbers 24, 24, and 31. And I think it's going to be really fun having Bijan on your team this year.
And honestly, just based off the positional drop-offs difference between running back and receiver, for me, it almost seems like if I had the number one overall pick, I would pick Bijan just because of the heavy drop off we see in running back. Where, well, if you have the number one pick, you pick Bijan, you come back around at that, second, third round turn. You could get still two elite receivers. Then you have Bijan and two elite receivers, or however you want to do it, get another running back. But honestly, for me, he's my favorite. Now that we're talking about it and laying it all out as number one overall pick, he's the one that I'm going with number one.
Yeah, yeah, he's super fun. But that'll do it for us today. We will hit you with the next episode. We'll take a break from the rankings. So we got a hot takes episode coming in. So we had a lot of fun doing the rookie hot takes a while back. So we're both looking forward to doing this hot takes one. But yeah, should be a lot of fun. Um, yeah, anything to add?
No, yeah, excited to, keep things going and get this season underway. We actually today or tomorrow, as today we're recording on Wednesday, is our first NFL preseason game. So
Yeah.
football's finally back.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
Yeah, there won't be much to talk about, but hey, it'll be fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. See you in the next episode.
Peace.